I want to welcome you to our event this evening. My name is Deb Delisle, and I'm currently serving as the CEO and Executive Director of ASCD. It's a position I took in July. I was formerly the Assistant Secretary of Education at the U.S. Department of Education. I have been a lifelong educator, and I have forever been committed to ensuring that every child has support and advocacy, and they're healthy and safe, and they feel challenged. And so I never wanted us, whether I had been a superintendent or even a teacher, to get into the throes of just judging kids simply by one achievement test scores. So when I came to ASCD, it was such a gift for me because of the total dedication that they've had on the whole child. And I know I'm speaking to a crowd here who believes in this concept of nurturing the whole child, and I'm sure you're going to love this evening's program. I also do want to say we have what I'm going to say are the country's greatest heroes. We have a small grouping of people with us this evening who are some of the country's greatest heroes. They are Teachers of the Year. So would you please stand, Teachers of the Year? Awesome. Thank you for joining us. They were with the president yesterday, so I'm so honored that you are now chosen to come to see us this evening. I know this is not the White House, but we want to celebrate you. They're in town all week for their big award ceremony. They have a big gala tomorrow night, and we are hosting the Teachers of the Year at ASCD tomorrow as part of a great sponsorship with CCSSO on the Teachers of the Year. So thank you so much for being here, and we just honor the work that you do every single day for America's kids. I really appreciate it. Throughout my career, I've always believed that what we offer to our children, to our students, tells them what it is that we value. So when we are advocating for them, it says that we believe in you and we believe in your future. When we offer them hope every single day, which is the greatest gift that we can give to our kids, we tell them that we value them. We value them for who they are, for what they bring to the learning environment, and most especially for what they can become. So again, I really believe that the greatest gift we can give kids is hope. Hope for a brighter future for themselves, and hope to be part of a global community in a very productive way. So that's why this whole notion of celebrating, honoring, and most of all, embracing the whole child is so vital, not just to the work that ASCD does, but I feel like I've carried it in my heart for the past 42 years. It's my pleasure to introduce a treasured colleague who's become also a good friend. He travels the world tirelessly on behalf of ASCD, but most especially imparting the good wisdom, knowledge, and heart of what comprises the whole child. So, Sean Slade, my colleague and friend.
Thank you very much, Deb, and welcome to everybody to this wonderful little venue that we've been doing now for 3 years, these Whole Child Symposia, which have been, I personally think, very enlightening and very engaging. As Deb said, I'm Sean Slade. I'm Director of Outreach at ASCD and have been a strong proponent of whole child approach and initiative for a number of years now. And we try and do these talks so they hark back to the mission of whole child, not just if they're healthy and safe, but if they're engaged, supported and challenged as well. Because we don't want kids just to be healthy or just to be safe or even just to be challenged. We want them to be healthy, safe, engaged, supported and challenged. All 5 of those. This is coming to you live in person to the people here, but also live on stream, online streamed from the Knight Conference Centre here at the museum in Washington, D.C. And if you were here live in person, you'd be able to see the wonderful view with the Washington Monument and the Capitol building and everything else. It's also being recorded, and there is a report that comes out in about a month or 2 after this, which outlines the discussions and all the wonderful, engaging comments that all of our panelists will surely make in the next couple of hours. It's also being followed on social media, on Twitter, with the hashtag WCS16. So, what's the purpose of this Whole Child Symposium that we've been doing for a couple of years now? Let me give you a very brief synopsis. We're really here to discuss today's pressing education issues and really to elicit some varied viewpoints that provide actions that we can all take, whether we're teachers, whether we're students, whether we're policy makers, whether we're superintendents, whether we're parents, to really engage the student in the work that we do and improve education systems. We want to be proactive in the education debate as opposed to reactive. Actually getting our thoughts out there and making sure that what we know is good pedagogy and effective education is there for everybody. We also want to discuss the most relevant issues needed to be discussed at the moment. And we choose the topics a month or two out so we can actually get a topic which is, dare I say, forgive the pun, engaging, but also meaningful. We obviously want to maintain a focus on the child, being a whole child symposium, but we also want to put educators back in front of the education debate. Last year I quoted this but didn't have the slide, so we have the slide now on this one. This came from Media Matters last year. They did a poll of how many times when the major cable news networks were discussing education, how many times they actually had educators talking about it. 9% was the average, and that was taken over a year. So it wasn't a snapshot of 1 week or 1 month or 1 day, it was over a year. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we get too many people who have gone to school but have never really worked in schools or lived in schools or dedicated their lives to learning and education, making decisions and talking about education. So the idea with this is that we start to put educators back on in front of the education debate, whether they're authors or researchers or speakers or teachers or students. And today we're also very honoured to have some students from DC Public Schools who will take part in this debate and panel later on as well from the Future Project. I mentioned we've been doing this for a couple of years, and we do have reports about the topics we've discussed. And if you haven't tuned in previously, the first one we talked about was the future of education, choosing your tomorrow today. The second one we talked about was teacher leadership, how the role of teachers is changing and also needs to change. And the one we discussed last spring was poverty in education. It was unfortunately the first time that the majority of public school students in the US were coming from homes in poverty, 51%, and coincidentally 51 years since the war on poverty was launched. This topic, the engagement gap, harked back to the third of our whole child tenets, that we believe that each child needs to be healthy, safe, engaged, supported and challenged. But it also harks back to what we're trying to do in schools, that we're perhaps focusing too much or have been focusing too much on the products or the outcomes of education and not focusing enough on the process of learning. And it may be semantics and it may be words, but there is a difference there, and there's a difference in the meaning as well. And I'm sure when you hear our 4 panelists speak today, you'll understand that difference. Speaking of the panelists, we have a very esteemed group to introduce to you today. And I'll be introducing them one at a time as this goes on, because we're trying to do a talk show format. Since this is the engagement gap, since we're trying to be engaging, we're going to try and make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more active. So as opposed to having a panel or a doctoral thesis presentation by each of the presenters, we're going to have a conversation up here. We have Russell Qualia, the founder and president of the Qualia Institute for Student Aspirations. We also have Kaya Henderson, Chancellor of DC Public Schools. Benna Kalik, an ASCD author and speaker on habits of mind. And we were meant to have, as you see in the picture there, Joe Fathery, but I'm sure Joe, well, maybe he's not tuning in because Joe came down with the flu and couldn't unfortunately make it. But if you are tuning in, Joe, we hope you get better soon. But we are quite privileged to replace. There we are, smooth, hey, smooth. Yeah. Replace Joe with his Illinois counterpart. So we have Kim Thomas, who is the Illinois State Teacher of the Year for 2016. I was going to put like a cold compress around his head before I took it away, but I didn't have the time since that came through this morning. So as I mentioned, we're going to try and do a talk show format. There will be a long time at the end for question and answers. We'll be having the guests coming up one at a time and having some discussions. and we really want to get your questions. You are welcome to send them via Twitter if you're in this room, or even if you're not inside this room, or we'll have microphones going around afterwards. Hashtag. It's also on all of the slides, the hashtag down the bottom, which is WCS, Whole Child Symposium 16. And this one is something a little bit different, and this might fail miserably, but we'll give it a go regardless. We're going to try and make it more engaging for the people here and online by also doing some poll everywhere questionnaires. So what you need to do, if you are on a computer, you can, when the poll is active, respond to pollev.com/wholechild. If you are on a cell phone, which I think the majority of people are here, you can text the word whole child, does not need to be uppercase, to 22333, and then you are in. And to test that out, we are going to give you a question. This is the first time we'll see if this works. It takes a couple of seconds to generate, but it's looking successful, and we have some responses. So if you are in the room, it is whole child 22333. All right, so why the engagement gap? Because we've talked about poverty, and the 51%, the 51 years was a pretty good reason to talk about poverty. We've talked about the future of education. We've talked about teacher leadership. So why engagement? This quote is from Connie Rath from Gallup Education, from a recent report called The State of America's Schools. And I'll read a little bit of it. Right now, our schools are not set up to match students' talents with college and career paths they find fulfilling and on which they excel. The current focus on standardised testing assumes that all students should have similar educational experience, and we leave little time for students to figure out what they love to do and where their greatest talents lie. We waste time and we waste talent. Excellent teachers supported by gifted visionary school leaders, and you'll hear from some of them today, keep students engaged in the learning process and hopeful about their own futures. That was the word that Deb mentioned in the introduction, keeping people hopeful. And students who strongly agree that their school is committed to building students' strengths and they have a teacher who makes them excited about the future are almost 30 times as likely to be engaged learners.